Chapter 25. My twin brother, Nayenezgani, has become the hunter. He has accepted his Navajo blood. Now I must stand ready, even though I only watch from the world of my ancestors. My time of helping my brother is near. I am the brother who distracts Adi Gashi so that my twin brother can kill the evil. I do not know how I will do such a task, but grandfather has told me to believe in the strength of the story. He says that will be enough to bring me the answer I seek. Nakai picked up the creature's blood trail on the other side of the thin lava dome. The creature's bleeding was slowing, now down to just a drop of green fluid every few steps. The creature might have some sort of ability to heal itself, or at least stop the blood loss. For 20 minutes Nakai kept going as the sun broke over the horizon, sending clear warnings of the warmth to come. The black lava rock would act like an oven top in the heat of the day. Of course, Nakai hoped to be off this rock before that happened. He had just over an hour before the colonel started his next attack. He was either going to find the creature and report back before then, or die when the airstrike hit. After what had happened back in the valley, Nakai had no doubt that the colonel was going to level this area. Nakai removed the rope from his pack as he scrambled up a shallow slope. He gripped the rope in two hands, testing its thickness. It would do. It would have to do. When he reached the top of the slope, he paused. The view ahead was like a scene out of Arthur Conan Doyle's novel, The Lost World. Thousands of years before, the flowing lava had forked like a river. The lava had split on a ridgeline, flowing around a small valley. At the other side of the valley, the two streams of lava had rejoined. Nakai stared into the valley. It was like looking at a dream. The area was about 10 football fields across and 10 long, with plants and small trees growing all through it. In the winter, the valley was a swamp or even a shallow lake, collecting all the water off the lava around it. Now, in the summer, the trees were still fairly green, with the weeds and brush a light brown. Nakai imagined that by the end of the summer, the entire valley would be brown and dried out, ready to start the entire cycle over again when the winter rains and snow came. He had been hearing the faint sounds of chirping birds as he came up the slope, and he had attributed it all to the explosions the night before. He had been afraid that the deafening noises had ruined his inner ear, and he had tried to ignore that fear. But the ringing and chirping that he had heard had actually come from the valley below. The morning light had awakened the birds, just as it did in greener places. Above the foliage a half-dozen vultures floated, circling over something just inside this edge of the trees. Something down there was dead, or very near dead. Vultures didn't circle that close unless there was food. Nakai studied the rocks in front of him. The creature's blood trail led right into that valley. He crouched near another collapsed lava dome and stared down. The valley was a perfect place for the creature to camp. More than likely, there was still some water down there, and enough shade for the creature to get out of the sun during the heat of the day. And the lava fields made a natural barrier. Smart, Nakai said, softly to himself. He pulled out his binoculars and studied the tree line closest to him. There was nothing in sight, no creature and no dead body. He turned slightly and saw a trail below him that looked recently used. He then studied the foliage farther in, trying to spot what those vultures were circling over. It took a moment before he focused on the glasses of a human head. Even from a distance, Nakai could tell it was Sheriff Bogle's. The sunglasses and hat were still firmly in place on the head, where it sat on a stump. As Nakai watched, one of the vultures landed next to the head and pecked at it, ripping a hunk of rotting flesh from the cheek. Nakai eased the glasses to the right a little, not really understanding what he was seeing. Finally, the picture came into focus. It was the creature, covered in its own green blood. It was lying on its back, its arms extended as if it had fallen into that position. Two of the vultures were now on the ground near the creature, eating at another human head scattered near the camp. The creature didn't move. "Is it dead?" Nakai whispered to himself, continuing to study the monster. He couldn't see if it was breathing. Could they have been lucky enough to have mortally wounded the creature in the fight? Nakai checked his watch. 1 hour and 10 minutes left. He had time for a closer look, although he wasn't sure how close he wanted to get. A wounded animal was a dangerous animal, and he wasn't sure he wanted to face a more dangerous version of this creature. Still, he had an opportunity. He would hate himself if he didn't take it. He could imagine himself hurrying back to the colonel, reporting the creature's position, and then have another debacle occur like the one last night. More people would die, and it would all be on Nakai's conscience. He wouldn't get too close, just close enough to shoot the thing. Not even within range of the thing's arm, barely within sight range. After he made sure his rifle was set for full auto, he eased down the slope, walking as silently as his grandfather had taught him. Not a stone was moved by his steps, not a twig snapped. He reached the edge of the tree line and eased into the forest, moving slowly, carefully, listening for any sign that the creature was awake or alive. Nakai was so quiet, he didn't even alert the birds. They continued singing as if nothing were wrong. 10 steps into the trees, the smell hit him. Rotted flesh, putrefied in the heat of the last few days. Rotten human flesh. Nakai felt his gorge rise, but he swallowed hard, wishing he had something, tobacco, Vicks, anything, to block the smell. He wanted to turn back right then, but he knew he couldn't. If that monster was just asleep, he could kill it with a full burst to the head. If the monster was already dead, he would be able to take proof back to the colonel. And if it were playing possum, well, at least he wouldn't die under friendly fire. Above him, the thin trees seemed to tower. The dirt under his boots was soft in comparison to the lava rock. The trail wound through the brush like a snake, twisting back and forth on the path of at least resistance through the trees. The creature's blood dotted the trail every few steps, and puma tracks, a few days old, also marked the trail. The farther in, the worse the smell. With just the slightest breeze, it choked Nakai, almost making him cough. If he made it out of this alive, he was going to need a dozen showers to get this smell off his skin. It was going to take a lot more than a few showers to get it out of his memory. He pulled out his handkerchief and wrapped it over his nose and mouth. It didn't help much, but it made him feel better as he moved forward. 5 more slow, careful minutes, and he was within 30 paces of the creature's camp. Through the brush, he could see glimpses of the creature, still unmoving on the ground. Then he made a mistake. He was staring ahead, watching the clawed hand of the creature as he stepped forward. If he had been watching where he was stepping, as he should have been doing, he would have seen the thin cord. But he didn't see it, and his foot brushed it. There was a loud snap, and suddenly everything around him seemed to be moving at once. Without time for the slightest thought, he dove to the left, rolling forward towards the base of a tree. He almost made it. The spiked branch that had been held tight by the tripcord ripped into his shoulder, spinning him around and down. The pain was incredible, as if 1,000 needles were being shoved into his arm and neck at the same time. But he kept moving, rolling, until he came up sitting, back against a trunk. He still had his rifle in his left hand, but his right arm and shoulder were going to be useless to him for some time to come. A dozen thorns had torn into his shoulder, ripping muscle and tendons alike. A low, growling filled the trees. It was an unearthly sound like nothing he had ever heard before. Through the pain, Nakai knew he was going to die. The creature hadn't been dead, but only resting, and now, very shortly, it would have another head for its camp, and Nakai's body would be nothing more than food for the vultures.